I'm Alex.
And I'm Teddy.
And I'm Spencer.
And we are
The Button Mappers.
Hey, the Button Mappers.
Guys, welcome to Button Mapper Station, where we station all of our gaming experiences. I'm Teddy. With me today is Alex.
Hold on, I'm loading.
Spencer.
Almost done loading.
And extra special guest, Derek the Completionist.
The OG completionist. I'm loaded as far as I know. Not the alcoholic kind.
Listen, there can only
He is
be
loaded
one.
today, folks.
And the one completionist I know is you. Welcome to the show, Derek. It's great having you.
Thank you, my friend. It is greatly appreciated.
Guys, what's your first memories of seeing the completionist on YouTube and interacting with him, etc., or some memorable ones? I guess I'll start. So, I guess I started off very low, views and subscribers and exposure on YouTube, and Derek was in kind of like a circle of good friends of mine that I made at the time, like Leo and another guy, Crack Lotus, and when I met Derek, through YouTube, we had a lot of great conversations around the content, and we just had very natural interactions, and then that kind of translated over to social media, and we had a lot of great conversations from there. Derek has always been an incredible friend and always supportive of other creators, and he's shown public support for me, and I know it's been truly appreciated, and I'm always so flattered by him. And yeah, I don't know, I can't help but start this episode by gushing about how awesome of a person you are, Derek. Just thank you for being the amazing individual that you are.
No worries. And I also gave you the tagline, the chillest of the chill.
The chillest of the chill.
Yeah, actually, I was gonna say I probably found Derek through you, Teddy, through mentions on your channel. It's probably where I first came in contact.
Yeah, I met, I learned about you through the group that we were in, the one that Teddy was talking about. And I just always know you as the gentleman of YouTube. You're the stand-up class act guy. And you you make these really long videos about, sometimes about semi-minute topics, but you always have so much wisdom to expound. I'm just listening in awe. Just at all this, just going over and talking about Xenogears and stuff. And I always look forward to your videos, man. So I was blown away that they got you on here, because I know, and we were talking about this off air, but yeah, you are a difficult man to get a hold of. So when Alex was like, I think we can get Derek on, I'm like, wait, the Derek? Are you sure? So
No, and guys, I do appreciate the kind words, and I'm just going to briefly reflect on what makes all of you guys great, because I'm still subscribed to each and every one of you guys, and I know you guys can sometimes hit dry periods, especially when it comes to making content, but I've always stayed subscribed to each and every one of you guys. For Majority, it's, I found him just basically through the same circle of friends. But, one of the reasons why is, Majority has always kept it incredibly honest. But in my eyes, you are an ultimate storyteller. And it's just, there is absolutely no negativity to you at all. You always bring up interesting topics, and you do it with such kindness and such grace. And it doesn't matter if it's talking about video games or one Christmas, you were talking about a beer a day, for the 12 days of Christmas, and that kind of thing. And it's just, that's where the tagline came from, the chillest of the chill. It's just that you're the type of person that could tell any kind of story, no matter what the topic. And it will always be engaging. It will always be insightful, and that's one of the reasons why that I've always stuck around. And I've always felt that one of the greatest aspects of your channel was your majority speaks, because basically you'll talk about things in a very kind and respectful way about things you don't hear a lot about in the video game industry, and that deserves a lot of respect in itself.
Thank you for that.
No worries. And for TurboZone, I found you through Majority, and I always appreciate all the topics that you bring up. I love the Twilight Zone vibe to your channel. That is completely original, and it's incredibly epic. And it's just that, you know, you make really good videos in that nice little sweet spot between like 10 and 20 minutes, and you always keep things incredibly honest. And you know, with Spencer and, you know, the Itch Network, it's the same thing. I found you guys through the same circle of friends, but the thing is that, you know, even if it's just you solo, or, you know, when you used to do stuff with your group of friends, you just had excellent chemistry, and it was also excellent humor. And it's just, you guys always had a different great story with no matter what type of video game content that you talked about. And I also remember there was this one time that you did this Halo cheat video that suddenly just blew you guys up, and you didn't know how to handle it, and it was absolutely crazy. I think that video actually hit 1 million views, and it was kind of crazy because your average view count, you know, on your videos, it range anywhere from like 200 to 1,000 views, and all of a sudden you did this Halo cheat video of like somebody cheating, and it just suddenly blew up, and you guys had no idea how to take it, because all these comments were just flying in and out of nowhere. So
Yeah, that was very weird. We got paid for that, so that was cool. Didn't get paid anything like that again, but
Sell out.
Thank you, though. That's very, very kind. I appreciate it.
Thank you, man.
no worries.
We might as well retitle this one Public Gratitude episode.
Aw.
But instead, we're going to talk about an OG console in honor of an OG himself. We're going to talk about the OG PlayStation, PS1.
Because it's PlayStation month.
And
Welcome
in
to
this PlayStation month, we're talking all things PlayStation 1.
But before we do that, join us on Spotify and Apple Podcasts, and don't forget to put in your disc for Discord. It'll load eventually.
Well put. PlayStation 1. Let's talk about the memories. Where were you? What was it like? Derek, we'll let you go first. What are your memories and experiences with the PS1?
My memories and experiences with the PlayStation 1, I never got a PlayStation 1 until very late into the lifespan, because growing up in a small Newfoundland community, we just didn't have access to the system. You know, the craziest thing with me and the PlayStation 1 is that when it was first released, you know, I really started to take notice with it, you know, when the trailers for Final Fantasy VII came out, you know, in 1997. And I remember watching the commercials for the very first time, and ultimately I felt disappointed because I found out that the game was going to be released on the PlayStation, and I've been so used to the Final Fantasy series, you know, being on the Nintendo. So I was that ignorant teenager that I really thought, oh, Final Fantasy going to a brand new system, oh, it's always been on a Nintendo system, it's not going to do well, it's going to fail. And unfortunately, like I said, I didn't get a PlayStation 1 until 1999. My other experiences with the PlayStation was literally just watching other people play it. And but I didn't get a chance to watch other people play it until I got into college, which was 1998, because anyone in my community or locally, they didn't have a PlayStation, they had an N64 instead. So I never got to see PlayStation games get played until 1998, and I never got to play one myself until Christmas of 1999. And one of the first games that I bought for it was Final Fantasy VII. And to me, that game, and thankfully at that time, even though, you know, in the late 90s, you know, the internet was starting to get very popular, thankfully, I actually avoided spoilers, so I didn't know anything about Final Fantasy VII when I got to play it for the first time. And even to this day, in December of 1999, it still remains to me some of my most treasured video game memories, playing that game for the very first time.
It's a great story.
I also didn't get a PlayStation very, very late. I got it in high school. But I remember watching my friends play it. I had it at two of my friends had one. This girl had one that was my neighbor, who's my friend from since I was like 3 years old. She had one, and she was really into JRPGs. And then my other friend had it, and he was into everything else, not JRPGs though. So from him, I got to see Metal Gear Solid, Siphon Filter, some of the racing games, Abe's Odyssey, anything you could kind of think of. And then with her, I saw her play Final Fantasies, some Crash Bandicoot, and ironically enough, Jedi Power Battles, which always holds a special place in my heart. So it was always this really magical console, and once I got my hands on it, it was pretty much past its prime anyway. But I look back on those memories very fondly because they're always tied to those friends of mine. So I love it.
I got a PS1 and an N64 growing up. So eat that, guys.
Cool guy.
And I remember I actually, we weren't that well off. I was lucky to have both those, but we sold it. We sold both consoles in the year 2000 to get an Xbox, or it was 2000 or 2001. But while I had that original PS1, I was very young, so it was all platformers for me. It was like Crash Bandicoot, Spyro the Dragon, Gex, Croc, Ape Escape. Those are all the games that I remember playing at that time. But what's funny about the PS1 is that, like, even though that's the last time I ever owned the actual hardware, I've always been able to play those games. So, after I got an Xbox, I had that for like a year, then realized there was like no games that I wanted to play on it. So we actually traded it in for a PS2, and the PS2 played PS1 games. And then later on, I got a PS3, and that plays PS1 games. So it's like everything, like different. Well, I always had a way to play PS1 games. So I would always go back and pick up PS1 titles. That looks interesting. I'll play Tenchu, whatever. I'll play, this weird looking game. And I don't know. It's always been a console that up until the PS4 I've always had, access to.
Like Alex, I grew up with both. So eat that, Alex.
No, they can eat that. I'm on your team.
Yeah, we're eating.
Yeah.
Yeah, they're eating.
Really? I thought you were hungry. So PlayStation 1 was a gift from my half-sister, which was weird because, my parents had got me the N64 first. And so I grew up with not only the N64, but with video games with the N64. And so all of my memories were created from that console up. And so when I got the PlayStation 1, I didn't necessarily have nostalgia for it. In fact, in my whole lifetime, I've had a total number of games that you can count on two hands for that console. But the gesture was always appreciated. I'm not necessarily that close with my sister, despite us being in close proximity. And I always kind of think back to that. Like, even though I was just a child, she put some thought into this gift. And I got a couple really good games with it that I dabbled in, but I never managed to beat any of them, including like Pac-Man, World Championship, whatever. It's not World Championship. It's Alex.
Pac-Man World.
Pac-Man World, yes. Crash Bash and Crash 3. I did later finish Crash 3, but not on the PS1, just on the later consoles. So that is my experience with the PS1.
Cool. Do you guys want to go over some launch titles?
Sounds good to me.
Yes. All right, so the PS1, I have them all brought up by region here. We'll start in Japan. The Japanese launch titles, and I hope I don't crash and burn with some of these names. Wow, the first one. Well, there's a Parodius game. There's a long name, but I can see it's Parodius. There's Mahjong. There's two Mahjong games. Ridge Racer, Neketsu Oyaka. I don't know if that's right at all. I don't know. Two other games I haven't heard about. The U.S. launch titles: Air Combat, Battle Arena Toshinden, Spencer's favorite ESPN Extreme Games. There's NBA Jam. Power Serve 3D Tennis, The Raiden Project, Rayman, Ridge Racer, Street Fighter the movie, Total Eclipse Turbo. That's for me. And then there's also
Turbo.
Wipeout. Yeah, and the original Wipeout.
What a disaster of a launch.
Yeah, not really like games you really like identify. Like Ridge Racer, Rayman, Battle Arena Toshinden. I think those are like the only three that I can really say like I think of like PS1. Like
I think of Wipeout kind of in that.
Yeah,
that's true. That's true.
Yeah, because like I remember, I don't know if you guys remember this, but in the 1995 movie Hackers, when they went to the hacker underground, I guess, club and that kind of thing, and the video game the main character was going against Angelina Jolie with, if memory serves me correctly, I think that was Wipeout.
That's cool.
When I think of
Hackers.
I don't know what hackers is, but it sounds cool. I like any type of video game tie-in. When I think of that lineup, a couple games do stand out for me for different reasons. In the Wipeout and Battle Arena Toshinden, in that both were on the Saturn. Although I think Wipeout's a different version on the PlayStation 1. It's like Wipeout 3. I don't know if that's the launch.
Toshinden got a re-release on Saturn.
Oh, okay. Interesting. So to me, it almost seems like a kind of mainstreamification of like what Sega was doing.
Yeah, you could say that. Maybe a lot of the diversity from like the Genesis library and stuff. I think what's interesting about the PS1 compared to like the N64 or the Saturn, I guess, is that the N64 per se, if you talk to an N64 owner, they're gonna say, they're probably gonna say the same games. They're gonna say Mario 64, Ocarina, GoldenEye, and maybe some like other random ones thrown in. If you talk to a PS1 owner, they could have played any number of games. I was a big Crash Bandicoot fan. I also played a lot of other platformers. Ape Escape's my favorite PS1 game. But if I talk to Spencer, I know damn well Spencer wasn't playing Ape Escape. Spencer was probably playing something else. And it's just very interesting that there's just such a diverse amount of games on that console.
I like Derek's point before about how Final Fantasy VII was kind of like a proving grounds for the PlayStation as a console, because prior to that it had been on the Nintendo. So did you feel like there was any kind of like skepticism towards the PlayStation brand before that, or like how well do you feel like the PlayStation 1 cemented the PlayStation legacy? Maybe that's a better question.
Well, I think what it really comes down with is that I think that could have been one of the PlayStation's biggest strengths, is that it really appealed to a multiple amount of gaming genres, because unfamiliarity to a lot of people is kind of a scary thing, and when a lot, even before the Final Fantasy VII trailers came out and people had heard that Final Fantasy VII wasn't going to be on a Nintendo system before, I remember people not being very happy about it, because Final Fantasy VI is often regarded as one of the best Final Fantasy games ever made, and people always felt that Final Fantasy was going to be a series that was always going to be cemented, with Nintendo. But when it came to the direction that Final Fantasy VII wanted to go in, and the N64 didn't have the specifications to keep up with it, because obviously the PlayStation had the disc system and the N64 had cartridges, Sony and Squaresoft, they took the risk, and Squaresoft took the risk, and they decided to make their game for the PlayStation, which ended up being a completely big success. And one thing I think a lot of people really didn't realize is that Final Fantasy VII really helped cement the JRPG genre, especially for Western markets. I put a lot of credit to Final Fantasy VI and Chrono Trigger for establishing a really good foundation for what they did for the Super Nintendo. But it wasn't until Final Fantasy VII came out that really took the JRPG genre and really sent it to the stratosphere, because I think the only RPG game that I can think of that existed for the PlayStation before Final Fantasy VII came out, and I know I'm going to be corrected, but I know Suikoden came out in 1996. But once Final Fantasy VII came out, then the flood of everything else came out afterwards, because it ended up being such a huge hit for that system. It was literally a system seller. That's definitely what that game was, the PlayStation.
That's sort of a fascinating perspective for me, because I'm fairly younger, so I've always associated Final Fantasy with the PlayStation brand, that's always, through PS1, the PS2 and stuff, that's always been my association with that brand. So I never thought about the fact that at the time, yeah, there was, it'd been weird to be like, Final Fantasy on PlayStation? What are you talking about?
Yeah, it's in Final Fantasy brought it into the West, like you said, and we were talking about it, Teddy and I, on a different thing. You can look at the sales numbers in America, especially like on the Super Nintendo, on the Nintendo, and they're just like laughably low. If you also then compare it to like a Final Fantasy VII sales, and it just blew everything out of the water, and it made it. I wasn't following like RPGs or anything pre PlayStation, so it's really hard to say like what the scene looked like, but it looked completely different once Final Fantasy VII showed up. I mean, that's the game that got my neighbor friend into RPGs, and once she was playing that, she was like looking for RPGs to play. And I'm sure that's the situation for like a lot of American gamers, was it's like, okay, this is now a genre that we'll accept and we'll want to play. So yeah, definitely Final Fantasy VII was one of the biggest PlayStation 1 games. Has to be, for sure.
We've talked a lot about what the PlayStation has appealed to, what its greatest assets are. Do you guys have any grievances or like things that you don't particularly like about the original PlayStation 1?
Probably for me, the limited space on the memory cards. I understand the reason why that they had to do it, but 15 blocks was not nearly enough, and it felt like, especially because as we started to get into the PlayStation 2, a lot of PlayStation 1 games got really super cheap. So it was very easy, especially at the very beginning of the PlayStation 2 lifespan, to really pick up a lot of PlayStation 1 titles at very low prices. But you also had that that additional cost of like having to get a memory card as well. And it's just that, and you had to label them because most memory cards always look the same. And there was always that small risk that, that the memory card could get ruined. And in hindsight, you really didn't want to erase your game. You wanted to hold on to that save file for dear life. And, on top of everything else, the fact that, you just had to keep buying memory cards. And I think even the Diablo game for the PlayStation 1 took up multiple memory card slots, and that was kind of insane. That was probably my biggest problem with the PlayStation 1. Another thing is that unfortunately the games were incredibly delicate, and it's just that even the slightest medium-sized scratch could actually ruin the PlayStation 1 discs. Just because they had that black back on a lot of the discs, so scratches and scuff marks were actually easily visible, and like any kind of, not even a deep scratch, but any kind of medium scratch would actually ruin your game.
Well, that's always been terrifying for me for I guess like collecting and stuff, is like that era of like CD-based games is so, like they're all so fragile. I think my biggest problem has always been the fact that it has 2 controller ports, and this also goes through the PS2. Take, for example, whenever I got a PS2, I went back and bought a lot of the PS1 games that I liked, and 2 of them were Crash Team Racing and Crash Bash. And those are multiplayer titles. And whenever I was a kid, I bought a PS2 multi-tap. Friends came over, we played PS2 games. We played like GoldenEye, Rogue Agent, and games like that. That PS2 multi-tap didn't work for PS1 games. I had to buy another PS1 multi-tap to play PS1 games, and I was like, man, this is just a big design flaw. Like, I don't know, like what they were thinking with that. Like, they should have, at least, had 4 controller slots. I mean, other consoles were doing it. The 64, the Dreamcast went on to do it, and Xbox and GameCube. So it's something that they should have probably. Yeah. Spencer?
I have a pretty big gripe, but it's still loading. Just give me a second.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Hold on. No, it's.
Dude, I played King of Fighters.
I think it's stuck right now. Hold
King
on.
of Fighters. I think it was King of Fighters 98 on the PS1, and oh my god, I swear the load times were like 5 minutes.
It's so funny because I don't know if it's just because I have a lot of patience, but it's just like load times have never really bothered me. I understand, trust me, I understand it's a legitimate complaint, and I know I know load times on a lot of PS1 games are completely atrocious, but it was just something that just never bothered me. Maybe it's just because I grew up in an environment where I didn't always get what I wanted, and you had to always had to learn to be patient. So I tend to be a little more forgiving towards it, but like I can understand people's problems with it.
Okay, mine's done. Mine is a double-edged sword. It's positive and a negative mixed with a learning moment for video games. It's art style. One problem, and the N64 suffers from this, but in different ways. But the PlayStation 1 had some pretty brutal graphics if they were trying to go for realism. And in a lot of games, they totally went for realism. It looks really, really bad in modern gaming, like when you look at it in hindsight. And I think they took some of those lessons, and that's how hopefully they realize, hey, maybe we should try cell shading if we can't achieve the look we're wanting, or maybe we should try a slightly different art style. Because if you look back at the PS1, they got things like the jaggies that they're famous for, the really awful looking faces, and I think they learned a lot of lessons through that. But certain games that I'm sure we'll talk about soon certainly suffer from it.
Daddy?
Oh, it loaded. Okay, so my complaint mostly has to do with, well, I mean, I did have like kind of like minor pickings with the loading times, only because I was using the N64 as a comparison, in that it shaped my like experiences with gaming. So there was no such thing as load times in a lot of these N64 games. It was instantaneous. Maybe there will be a segue like between a dungeon and the forest and Ocarina of Time, but that's it. Like a fade out and a fade in. But my main concern, I guess it really does tie into the memory cards. I said I probably have had 6-7 games. I've had 3 memory cards for my PlayStation 1. The first was a generic one that my sister got me that, and nothing against her for it. She didn't know. She's not a gamer. But it was like this little cheap one where it had like a little microphone and you could record messages in it. But you knew it wasn't a first brand memory card. And so that thing crapped out on me. Later, when I started trying to get more into like going back and playing games, when I first came back from college, I ordered myself a new memory card to replace it. And so I started playing Final Fantasy IX, and I put, a good 10 hours in. I was really enjoying it. And then that memory card corrupted. It wasn't first party, and I just didn't know it. It looked identical. And so at that point, I just kind of swore off the PlayStation for a while. And so now I order myself a original PlayStation 1 memory card, but who knows what the problem with that's going to be. Am I going to have data issues if I start going into PS1 collecting? Will I need to get more? Will this survive? Will I like the PS1? I don't know, but that currently is my main grievance.
Just buy a PS3 because you can just make as many memory cards and the system data that you want to.
I like the load screen
on the hard drive.
I don't get that with the
but
PS3.
It's like the best part about the PS3 is that you still get that. You put it in the game. I mean, because like
Okay.
like the PS3 is so nice because you don't have to worry about that for both consoles. For PS1 or PS2, if you have PS3 that can play PS2, is that like you can just create as many memory cards as you want on the hard drive as long as you have the hard drive space. It's so handy.
That's not a bad deal.
Yeah. So what are some of the games? Well, obviously we brought up Final Fantasy VII, but what are some of the games that are really synonymous with like PlayStation 1 for you guys?
For me, it's so funny because the PlayStation 1 is actually responsible for like a lot of my favorite games for their respective genres. Like for JRPGs, and this is common knowledge, for everybody. My favorite game of all time is Xenogears. I highly doubt anything will ever top that. It's and I've already discussed it, in great lengths, and it's always for me a timeless classic, and regardless of whatever problems people have with the second disc, it's still a timeless, memorable game, and it's a video game memory that I hold dear. Other PlayStation 1 games, I love, and let's go to different genres. My favorite fighting game of all time is on the PlayStation 1, which is Rival Schools. Absolutely love that game. Love that game. Still my favorite fighter to this day. My favorite game that's not really an anime style game, which is what I mostly collect, Metal Gear Solid. Love that game immensely. But one of the funny things about PlayStation 1 is that it got me to play gaming genres that I never really had any interest in playing, and I still don't play to this day. Despite me being a huge horror fan and slasher film fan and that kind of thing, I'm not really much of a survival horror gamer. But yet, during my time playing the PlayStation 1, I actually did play the first two Resident Evil games, and I actually beat both of them, but after Resident Evil 2, I really had no interest in the survival horror or the Resident Evil series. But I still gave those games a shot as well. So
There's in the effort to try to name something that might be semi-unique, I will, because you named some of mine, Derek.
sorry.
Yeah, mine too.
I would do Driver 2.
I have that.
That game is so much fun. I have so many memories of trying to beat that game and just like adoring it. Like looking back, it's kind of like
Oh my god!
like Grand Theft Auto did like everything it does but better. But
Getting out of the car in that game was ridiculous.
oh my, and the
then-
graphics of that guy
And the music, yeah, and the music's like this, like 70s, like, and you're,
it's kind of a nightmare of a game, but I remember loving it and just having a great time. Yes, Metal Gear Solid, phenomenal. Chrono Cross is an interesting experience. Once you beat Chrono Trigger, you can try to figure out what Chrono Cross is talking about, and if you do, then I congratulate you.
Still to this day, my favorite video game soundtrack of all time.
Yeah. Just play it for the soundtrack. Don't worry about the story. It is bonkers. Tony Hawk's Pro Skater is an interesting one because
damn it, that was mine.
I'll let you talk about it. I'm going to name that.
No.
And then let you okay. Well, I was just going to name it because I actually played it on the N64 way more than the PlayStation 1 because I didn't have a PS1 at the time. But really, the game feels like it was meant for the PlayStation with all the cutscenes they got and all the music. And
yeah, the music was like cut down on the 64 version.
Yeah. I mean, I played on the N64 a ton, and then like my friends had it on the PlayStation. Like, oh, I'll give it a shot. I'm like, whoa, this is a different game. This is it's super weird. But I love that game. But I'll play it however I can get. But those two I'll name, and a lot of the other ones are pretty obvious. But those would be my picks.
Well, the only games that are synonymous with the PlayStation 1 for me are the ones that I've played, which is like 6. But then there's also ones that I've played like later after the fact because of re-releases and stuff. And so in a sense, I do think of the PS1 through those. So I'm going to stick with those. Definitely the Crash series, Crash 1 through 3. And, I only owned Crash 3 growing up. But they are solid, platformers that are relatively competitive to the Mario and the Sonic and the mascot platformers of the time. Jack, that's mostly
PS2. That's PS2.
Jack
PS2.
Precursor is PS2.
PS2.
Is that right?
Yeah.
Okay, then never mind. Spyro. So I went on a vacation one time when I was like a kid with my parents, and they took me to a hotel. It's like in Cancun or something. And in the hotel room, I remember they had like a PlayStation behind a glass shield, and you could go on the menu on the TV and you could rent a game. And so I rented Spyro the Dragon for an hour, and I just cruised around, like running around as a dragon, not knowing what I was doing. But I was really nostalgic about it. The idea of like, oh, you're a dragon. That's so cool. I'm 5 years old, or whatever. And so that's really nostalgic for me, those kind of like mascot platformers. And then also definitely in terms of RPGs, the PS1 has them. And so, I know I played Dragon Quest 7 through the 3DS, which was great. But Dragon Warrior 7 on the PS1, solidified that first. And so I have to pay homage to it, even if it is kind of more in the style of the classic Dragon Quest games. And the fact that Tornico's mystery dungeon exists on the thing, that's really cool. And so I definitely think of that console for mascot platformers and JRPGs.
You guys already brought up a lot of the landmark titles that I was thinking of. Obviously like Metal Gear. I'm a huge Resident Evil fan. I absolutely love Crash Bandicoot. But some of the other games, and Tony Hawk's Pro Skater. Thanks, Spencer. Some of the other games that I was going to talk about. For one, my favorite PS1 game is Ape Escape. That's such an original platformer. It's like playing Mario 64 if the things you collected were aggressively like trying not to be collected. So you're like the stars are like, fuck no, we're not doing this. Like they're all running away and hiding. It's a super fun game. One of my favorite games, I would say I like this game more than the original Resident Evil games, is Parasite Eve. It's such a cool combination of horror and art, like JRPG. It's a game that we absolutely have to map out at some point. I am in love with that game. Ever since the first time I played it, sometimes I'll just pop in the disc just to hear and see like the intro cinematic because it's so iconic. Absolutely love Parasite Eve, and I don't know. I played a lot of other games. Like that was one of the first consoles that really for me like started getting compilations of older games. I played the Namco Museum titles on the PS1. That was really like a big part of my childhood. That's where I learned like Galaga and Pac-Man and Dig Dug and Bosconian, like all these old school Namco games, these Namco arcade games that would be like my favorites. I first played those on the PS1 through like those game collections and stuff. So a lot of good memories with the PS1.
Speaking of great memories with the PS1, it's that time again, guys. Hidden gem time. What is one hidden gem that you know for the console?
Metal Cheese is here.
Hi, Metal Cheeses.
You guys, you guys can go first on that. I need to think on that for a while.
Hidden gem, definitely not the Powerpuff Girls game. Yeah. Oof, that's tough. I like the Space Invaders redo they did on the PS1. It's like it looks kind of ugly. Like they were trying to do it like a modern one. Like it's a guy this like in a space marine program and he's in this like ship and shooting up at the aliens. But the game plays like Space Invaders, but it has like this cool mechanic where like the different aliens are like different colors, and if you match like 3 of them or 4 of them, you get a power up and stuff. And they kind of took that and ran with it with later like Space Invaders extreme titles and stuff later on. It's a very cool game, and that was like from an era where they were trying to like bring back all sorts of arcade games and like make them more modern, and some of them worked, some of them failed miserably.
I never had a PS1 long enough to know about too many hidden gems, so I'll just pick
Just
one that I
say
don't...
Metal Gear VR, whatever.
Yeah, Metal Gear of the VR missions thing.
Yeah.
Sure. There's one that I played on a demo disc that I was always blown away by, but I never had a PS1 at the time, so I couldn't get it, which was Brave Fencer Musashi.
Oh yeah.
You're like it's a SquareSoft game, and it's an action kind of platformer-ish kind of game, or maybe, I don't know. It was very varied on the demo disc that I played, and I always wanted to play it, but I never got to. Might be able to play it shortly here.
For me, a hidden gem, even though it comes from a well-established franchise, but I think it's the most misunderstood entry in that franchise, and it's Mega Man X6. That's my hidden gem.
Ooh.
The thing is that there's a very infamous YouTube video, that has like a very high view count, and it really takes Mega Man X6 and it really tears it apart. And I understand all the grievances people have with that game, but for me, I have a really soft spot for that game, and I really love it. A lot of people complain that the game is too hard when Mega Man X games aren't supposed to be hard, they're supposed to be enjoyable. But it's the fact that it is so hard and it is so unfair is one of the reasons why I love it. I consider it a hidden gem as far as I'm concerned. I don't think it deserves the hate it does, because I think it offers some of the best music in the Mega Man X series. I think it offers some of the best Maverick battles in the X series. But I can definitely understand why people don't like it.
But X4 has the better voice acting.
There you go.
That's actually...
Oh, sorry, go ahead.
That's actually a topic I want to bring up eventually. I do want to talk about the voice acting on the PlayStation 1. Eventually.
Daddy?
Einhander.
Oh, yeah.
I only put a good hour into it, but that hour I put in, oh man,
What is it?
that's probably one of the best spaceship shooters I've played. It's superb, and it's a little difficult. You don't have a shield on your ship, but it kind of takes this. I don't know the best way to put this. It's kind of like sci-fi dystopian urban kind of setting for the action, and so like everything looks like you're fighting like hovercraft cop cars combined with like other tech spaceships, and the mechanic is really cool for the spaceship. You can use like an arm to grab up to 3 weapon upgrades, and they're limited on ammo, so you have to kind of keep a good cycle of them going. And you know, there's a decent checkpoint system, and it gives you like 9 continues, which is pretty fair, so you have about like 27 lives. So it's a game I definitely want to invest more time into, and really a standout in the spaceship shooter genre.
What was the name again?
Einhander. It's got a umlaut over the A, I think, so it's like German. But
I don't think I've ever played that. That's cool.
and that was our conclusion of Hidden Gem time. But we do have maybe a more ferocious question to go out on. We'll do the serious one first. Between the N64 and the PlayStation 1 in a Royal Rumble to the death, which would survive? PlayStation 1 or Nintendo?
You know, a Royal Rumble. A Royal
Spencer,
Rumble
what about
is okay.
4. Okay, I'm done. Go ahead.
A Royal Rumble is where 30 competitors run to the ring in 1.5 to 2 minute intervals.
Okay, so there's 15 PlayStation.
I swear to God, I just listened to another episode where you explained this exact same thing.
Yeah, I feel like I have to keep telling you.
Yeah, it's the exact same thing you've explained to him already.
Don't worry, next time I'll bring it up again.
Well, the PS1 had more money, so they just would just buy it out.
They bought the ring.
Between the rivalry between Nintendo and PlayStation, especially between the N64 and the PlayStation 1, this is an unpopular opinion, but I remember in the 90s that like the Nintendo 64 had won a ton of game awards. I remember GoldenEye winning Game of the Year. I remember Ocarina of Time winning a winning Game of the Year as well. From various video game magazines, for their respective years. And this is just my personal preference, but despite all the great titles that the N64, one of the biggest problems I have with the N64 is that I think the system's actually aged terribly. And I think one of the reasons why is that it was Nintendo's complete focus on early 3D polygons. And it's just like a lot of the games just don't really look that good anymore. Now this is coming from a person who's a fan of pre-rendered backgrounds and that kind of thing. But it's just that I'm a retro gamer at core, and it's just that for me, gaming to me is almost at its most beautiful when it's actually 2D gameplay. And it's just like jumping a couple of generations ahead, some of the most beautiful games I think are made right now is the stuff that Vanillaware makes, like such as Odin Spear and Muramasa, the Demon Blade, and Dragon's Crown and stuff like that. It's those beautiful 2D visuals. And when I look at the PlayStation 1 and especially its 2D style games, such as Mega Man X4, and you had Castlevania Symphony of the Night, and you had the first Rayman, I think the beauty in those games are much more timeless, and they're much more beautiful than what the N64 could have ever released. I'm sure at the time that it was beautiful and it was revolutionary and it was still and it was still great to look at. But now that the systems are over 20 years old, I find that the look of a lot of N64 games, they just don't hold up as well as what a lot of the beautiful 2D games that the PlayStation 1 did. But that's just my personal preference.
Understandable. I respect where you're coming from. There's a lot of PS1 games I haven't played, and so I'm still open to playing them. I personally just have so much love and affection for the N64 games that do hold up particularly well, and I don't think those ones... I mean, Ocarina of Time, yeah, like I honestly, some of the textures are dated, for sure. But I think it's still a beautiful game in many regards, and especially like in terms of 3D platformers. I love the Banjo games. I love the Rareware games. I love the Mario 64. I love the Kirby and the party games. I love I still play the original Mario parties over the modern ones, and so I just have such an affection for what was pioneered on the Nintendo 64. So that's that's again, it's personal, you know. So.
Oh yeah. At the end of the day, it's all subjective because still one of my favorite games of all time for the N64 is a Rare game called Blast Corps, and I love that game. And it's just that, and there's certain aspects of that game that doesn't look the prettiest, but at the end of the day, it's just an opinion, and thankfully we've all known each other long enough that no matter if we agree or disagree, we're always respectful about it.
Screw you, Spencer.
Oh, go ahead.
I'm sorry. Go ahead.
I was gonna jump in here and say it's amazing to see that you guys are so agreeable and are so respectful of each other's opinion. You're both wrong, though. If you take if you take the subjectivity out of this and you take the objectivity into it, then the PS1 is the clear winner. There cannot be an N64 in this equation because the PlayStation 1 outsold it almost by 3 times. The PlayStation 1 has all the genres, where the N64 seems to be missing an important one. I don't know where the RPGs went. I don't know what happened. They just seem to have disappeared.
Driving simulator, I got you.
So, and if you look at it from a legacy perspective, the N64 had cartridges and no memory cards. I guess technically it had a memory card. Very few games needed it. PlayStation 1 had discs and memory cards. Next generation, GameCube has discs and memory cards. So they had to adapt to what the PlayStation was doing. So if a company has to do what the other guy is doing just to keep up, it means that the other guy won. So I'm going to go with the PlayStation is numero uno above the N64, and also, because you brought it up, the Saturn.
I was actually going to agree with Spencer, except for the Saturn shit. That's blasphemy. I mean, as much as I love the N64 and the library, it's hard to look at it and not see like a half step. Like, obviously, they wanted to jump into like the 3D gaming, but they had so many like these elements they weren't ready to like let go of from like previous consoles. Plus, the N64 controller is kind of ass. And the PS1 just felt like the next generation. It felt like a step up from what had come before, and the controller was an ass. But like Spencer said, it just has a better library of games. It sold better. I wouldn't say I don't like it more than the N64, but I think in terms of importance and relevancy, it's definitely, I think it holds up better than the N64.
Definitely agree with you. There's nothing wrong with a little ass.
Well, the N64, the problem is that the controller has 3 asses, and you got to hold all 3 of them.
Dude, it's a party. You get put more people on the system.
But I do not agree with Spencer. He should not be talking about the Saturn that way.
The Saturn doesn't even barely even in this conversation.
I got 2 of them right beside
I like
me.
that we asked which one's better, the N64 or the PlayStation. The Saturn also existed, and we didn't even bring it up. I mean, that's how bad the Saturn is.
Honestly, until Final Fantasy VII in Japan, like the PS1 and the Saturn were pretty neck and neck, and then Final Fantasy VII just fucking killed it. But
no. Well, it's kind of funny that you bring up the Saturn because I do have a lot of fondness for the Saturn, but we all know. Well, I don't know. My opinion of what killed the Saturn is that they were so focused on, I don't, especially Sega of America, I don't want any Japanese games. I don't want to bring any Japanese games over from Japan to North America, because I kind of feel like if the CEO of Sega of America was actually a little more generous with bringing a lot of more import titles, and they brought over Radiant Silvergun and all these great spaceship shooters and RPGs that got released in the I think the Saturn could have done a little better. I don't think it would have beat the PlayStation 1 because it did have the PlayStation 1 did have the Final Fantasy license, but I think if the Saturn had been a little more forgiving towards the Japanese games and bringing them over to North America and getting them translated, I think the system would have done a lot better.
I'm
I'm just gonna hold my 2 Saturns here for security the rest of the episode.
Yeah, those are nice table weights. Also, if you announce your console ahead of time, people might buy it. That's a that's just a little tip to Sega.
Don't you listen to him? Don't you listen to the mean man?
Yeah.
When I think of the PS1, a weird thing of me is you guys are talking about Japanese games. Could you imagine if all the Japanese games that came out for the PS1 that didn't make it over here actually made it over here? That thing had so many games that would have just like torn it up over here.
Doesn't it have the second biggest gaming library? I think the PlayStation 2 has the biggest gaming library of all time. But I think the PlayStation 1 is up there. I think it's maybe second or third.
Huge.
Maybe.
The Wii is also really high, but like I don't know the comparisons.
Yeah.
Well, the difference is that nobody wants to play Cold Stone Creamery on the Wii.
Hey, there's someone out there.
Don't say nobody.
Alex, are you admitting? Secretly sneaks off a
good
Cold
water.
Stone Creamery. Beautiful. I realize I probably sacked our community question for the month, but whatever. Great talk. Is there one PlayStation 1 game that you're looking forward to playing in the near future?
There are a ton of PlayStation 1 games that I still haven't played yet. Probably one of the biggest ones that I've tried to start several times, and I still just can't get it into it because the completionist aspect just keeps tripping me up all the time. I haven't beaten Final Fantasy 9 yet. So I'll try to remedy that in the near future, but there's still a ton of JRPGs I still haven't played for the PlayStation 1. I haven't played Breath of Fire 4. I haven't played Wild Arms 2. I haven't even played Suikoden 2 yet. So there's still and any of the Tales of Destiny games for the PlayStation 1. Those are definitely some of the ones that I do look forward to playing.
I was definitely going to say Final Fantasy 9 as well. Not even as a joke, because like I bought that game. Well, for one, we did Final Fantasy 7 last year for the podcast, and I assume eventually we'll do another Final Fantasy and maybe that one. But I bought it at a Goodwill a couple years ago for like $3 complete in box, and I was just like, okay. And it's just like been wasting time on my shelf right now. I haven't jumped into it, so that's one definitely that I would like to play.
I'm going to jump in here and say something a little different. Final Fantasy 9 for the PlayStation 1.
Tell me why.
It's Final Fantasy 9. Final Fantasy. No, I don't know. I've been looking to get into Chrono Cross for a while, and I've started it before, but this time I'm going to really commit and finish it. Not do the whole completion aspect, but just to see the credits. I got tripped up on it before. It has the kind of system where it's like you have to save, and if you die, you game over. Not all RPGs do that. Like Dragon Quest doesn't do that. You just respawn at the priest. And so that tripped me up the last time I played it on the PS1. But I think I'm going to try and push through and really grind where I have to and see it through, because I think there is something rewarding there. I've always kind of like thought about it in the back of my mind. Even while I've downsized my collection, I've never gotten rid of Chrono Cross. So it is one that I am looking forward to playing.
This is a tough question for me because of RPG Archive. There's been a couple requests for games. Like Xenogears is Spectrobes is not on there. Xenogears is on there, and I know a lot of people really like that one. And I liked what I played of it. It's just every time I start playing it, another game is like on the chopping block that I got to do. So it'd be nice to like just dedicate it to that. Another one is Persona, the first one.
Yeah, I haven't played. I haven't played any of the Persona games for the PlayStation 1 either.
So that one is on there because of obviously I'm a huge Persona guy and never played the originals on the PlayStation, so might do that at some point. So one of those are any of those hardcore RPGs, any of the ones that Derek mentioned too, besides the Tales of games. Those games can screw themselves. No, I'm just kidding. What's up?
Sorry, I thought you were done. Go ahead.
No, but yeah, any of the ones that Derek mentioned are also on there.
If I had to pick one that wasn't Final Fantasy 9, I definitely want to track down a copy of the Ghost in the Shell game for PS1 because it always looked really sweet, and I played a ROM of it on my PSP, and it was fun. But I want to like actually get a copy of that, and the original Diablo on PS1 would be one, but that one's like stupidly expensive now.
Why would you want to play Diablo on PS1?
Because I'm weird and I like doing stuff like that. So obviously, I could play it on PC easy, but like I don't know, man. It's weird. Like, yeah. Well, I mean, they have fucking Warcraft or whatever. No, Starcraft? Is it Starcraft or Warcraft? Well, one of them on fucking N64 as well. Starcraft, that's the one. And it's like, why would anyone want to do that? I don't know. But do I want to do it? Hell yeah, I do. So.
Oh no. That sounds like a nightmare. I guess with the Diablo, that kind of makes sense that it would be a nightmare, but still, Jesus.
But fortunately, this episode wasn't a nightmare. Ladies and gentlemen, thanks for joining for the PlayStation 1 Discourse. Derek, the completionist, it is a pleasure having you on. Thanks for joining us.
PlayStation.
Yeah. Also, before we go, we do have to mention one of the greatest things about the PlayStation 1, and that is that epic opening screen.
Oh, yeah.
Can you recreate it?
Come on, somebody play it.
That's like I can't because it's like the chimes. My voice doesn't go that high, but it's like kind of thing.
No, I'm surprised. I'm surprised one of you guys aren't just gonna like play the clip with that epic like.
Edit it in, yeah.
That's all we need, Derek, is you doing that.
Yeah, exactly.
We're probably gonna get copyright infringed just for what you just did.
Yeah,
this is lifelike. Oh, hey, before you go, we have a deep-seated rivalry here at the Button Mappers that has been frequently undecided. So we ask our guests on a regular basis. And since you are the OG, you know you've been there, you've lived through it all. Which one of these games has made the bigger impression on you? They are Clue Land for the NES or Columns for the Sega Genesis.
Tough choice.
Columns.
Really?
Yeah.
Yes. Tell us why.
Yeah, go ahead. Because frankly, I've never played Clue Land.
That's always the answer.
and it's just that, and it's only recently. It's only within the last year or two. It's actually been in the last year that I got the actual good Sega Genesis Mini, and Columns is one of the games in it. And even though Columns isn't really a game you can really complete, I always consider that game a good time waster. It's just that, it's good to actually just sink 20 minutes, 30 minutes into it, if you're looking for something to play before you go to bed or like anything along those lines. And it's always enjoyable. And I do like the fact that the combo system, it goes vertical, it goes horizontal and diagonally. And some of the combos you can rack up in that game actually make it really enjoyable. And you can actually, and even for a beginner player like me, you can actually get pretty far in the game.
We've been making Clue Land jokes for almost like 2 years now, and I was listening. I listen to a lot of podcasts while I work, and I was listening to some podcasts by Pat, the NES Punk, or I guess Pat Country, or whatever his name is. And one of the episodes, I forget which guest he had on, but they mentioned the like Clue Land and like how nobody cared about it, and I was just like, oh my gosh,
we made it.
That's our thing.
We proved it. Well said, Derek. I think you've sold me on Columns. Even though it's probably reinforcing my, beliefs. But,
just think of the music. Just think of the music, Teddy.
There we go. And on that note, one thing that does not suck like the Columns theme song. Sorry, I don't know if people like that out there. But Derek, your channel is amazing. Anybody in the listener audience who has not checked you out on YouTube, you are the completionist, the one and only in my eyes. And so don't confuse the completionist when you go check him out. Go check him out. He's great. He does a lot of excellent content, and as we were saying before, we are always looking forward to it, and it was a pleasure having you on.
No worries, guys. I appreciate the time, and it's always a great chat as always.
I'm trying to access the member card so I can save. A minute.
File corrupted. Flagrant error.
Oh!
Your podcast has terminated.
Damn it.
Hey y'all, don't forget to subscribe to them Button Mappers.